morning. Welcome to the Listen.Better podcast. David Hall and Peter Middleton. Delighted to have you on today in a double interview on the subject of creativity. Now, I've met you both in different guises. David, I've actually seen you in action delivering one of your courses. And Peter, I've met you recently through the Brighton Chambers of Commerce. And when I met you both in separate occasions, I suddenly thought, gosh, these two might have an interesting conversation. So today is the day. So, David, can I start with you first? Can you give us a definition of creativity?
Sure, and I kind of need to preface it with the statement that I come at this from a very engineering-based orientation, I guess, a very pragmatic view. And I have a very simple definition of creativity. And for me, creativity is the generation of ideas that are both novel and useful. And when I say novel, basically it means you hadn't thought of it before. So, Annabel, if you come to me with a problem and I can give you an idea that you'd never thought of before, then I reckon by definition for you that's novel. And if you can see how potentially to modify it to make the idea work, then you can see how to make that novel idea useful. And therefore it becomes creative at that moment in time.
Novel and useful. Okay, I'm going to scribble that down for later. Peter, turning to you. Now, I know you're in the thick of studying coaching and creativity. So tell us a little bit about the emergent theory and how that experience is important to creativity.
Yeah, so emergent theory is the idea of creativity that ideas want to spring from our life experience, from our perception, from where we are in our lives and our contextual environment. So in each person's experience, there is a set of convergent perceptions that then become a creative idea. And in that sense, you get the novel and the useful from that convergence.
And would you say that only some people are creative? I mean, I remember being told at school, "Oh, you're not very creative, Annabel." Is that true, or can everybody tap into their creativity?
I'd say that's not true. I think that's one of the biggest shaming narratives that actually everyone battles against with creativity. We all have innate creativity. It's just that accessing it takes a certain set of skills, and shame-based thinking is very much against a creative mindset.
David, would you agree with that? I can see you nodding.
Absolutely agree. And I think we all have a series of mental blocks in place that we evolve over time as we develop our life experiences. They lock us into a certain type of thinking. And the mental blocks become hardwired. They're actually hardwired in our DNA anyway. This is fight or flight stuff from days gone by. It used to be the case if you go back long enough on a prehistoric timescale, if you like, if you step out of the cave and do things differently, you could die. So those that failed to learn that lesson and kept stepping outside the cave and doing things differently, they eventually died. And what you're left with are our ancestors who learned the merits of playing safe and staying in or close to the cave. So we are naturally preconditioned as a matter of natural selection as individuals who want to play safe and do more of the same, maybe incrementally better, but not different. And that's what holds us back from creativity. And what we need are mechanisms to help us escape from those mental blocks.
Interesting stuff. So, Peter, what would someone's first steps be if they woke up one morning and said, okay, I want to be more creative? What would your baby steps be for them to start thinking in more creative ways?
Yeah, I very much agree with that. There's a difference between like stress-based scarcity actions and moving from a restful mind and being in a generative space. And what I mean by generative is anything that allows our body to actually generate energy and generate joy and playfulness. So it's actually a little counterintuitive, but I would recommend a intentional space where you turn all of your tech off. You're not moving in a task focused manner. You allow your body to actually surrender to the rest, and then just eat well and spend time with loved ones, spend time in nature. And I think you'll find that your body then begins to generate ideas in a more creative fashion.
Fantastic. I like the idea of joy, tuning into yourself, eating well, being in nature. David, what would you add to that?
I come at this from a different perspective. And I think there are kind of not two schools of thought, but two approaches to creativity. And certainly, I think what Peter has defined is what is traditionally associated with the creative process, that creating that space for and a readiness to accept those ideas. I have a very much more pragmatic view. I'm an engineer, for goodness sake, and a scientist by training. And I believe it's to do with managing the way the mind operates. What we want to do is to take the mind through a process that will explicitly overcome those mental blocks. And there are a whole range of creative problem solving ideation techniques that by definition will manipulate the mind to help you overcome those mental blocks. The difficulty we've got is that they tend to look quite odd, because what we're looking to do is to break free from conventional and traditional thinking. And you cannot use conventional and traditional techniques to escape from convention and tradition. You have to use unconventional, untraditional techniques, which we then perceive as being weird. And the only reason they're weird is because they're trying to take you away from what you normally think. And so there are a whole range of techniques, and I always treat them to be effectively boxed games for delivering creativity. And every technique is a different game. And when you lift the lid off the technique, off the box that contains the technique, what you see first is a set of instructions. And if you follow those instructions, you can manipulate the mind to explicitly overcome those mental blocks. And it's interesting, I think, as I say, this is kind of divergence from Peter, that I'm very keen to make sure that people can be creative in a workspace on an everyday basis without the need to create specific spaces and move into slightly more ethereal approaches within the mind. This is very pragmatic. If you follow these rules, then you will become creative. But you need to be able to suspend judgment and let go and play. Because if you're not prepared to play, then these won't work.
This is really interesting. So I'm starting to see a slightly diverging approach here. So Peter, do come back on that.
Yeah, I do agree with what you just said, actually. Within a mental framework, within the paradigm of the intellect, that is very useful. I think the challenges of the modern world, we're moving into a knowledge economy, those kind of solely intellectual spaces are becoming less and less useful. And I think that that kind of manipulation of the mind can only get you so far in terms of the creative solutions that we need on a large scale in terms of climate change, collapsing civilization, etc. The business model of the West is all based on postmodern rationalism, which is a great function. But I think that it's a little narrow for what we need going forward in terms of creative solutions. So that's the only reason I would say, to play in the space of the intellect not versus, but the dance between intellect and intuition.
Okay, so Dave, if we bring this into a business context, because we've all got that scene, we've been told to come into a brainstorm, let's use post-it notes, let's get creative, which is a tired solution, I would imagine, in your world. Can you give me some examples in a business context, perhaps countering the points Peter's made, where very creative solutions have come out of using your approach?
Absolutely. Brainstorming is kind of the go-to place when it comes to creativity. Organizations say we've got a problem, how are we going to solve it? I know, let's run a creativity session, we'll do some brainstorming. What we then typically do is get a group of experts together and be very afraid, because the experts are the creators and the guardians of how you do things around here. So what you've just done is handpicked the people that are most likely to come up with more of the same thinking. To counter that, what we do is tell them to refrain from filtering. If an idea comes in their head, it comes straight out of their mouth. So the idea is that if you do that, then that creativity can bubble forth. The snag is that useful ideas are very quick to form because they're based on past experience. Novel ideas are very slow to form because they're based on new connections in the brain. So if you take your experts and tell them to think quickly, then you're almost guaranteeing to get a long list of useful ideas, because you're not giving people time to generate the novelty that will drive creativity. And so what we use is a two-stage process. There's a whole range of techniques for doing this. And one of my kind of starting points, a technique called superheroes, where I've got a series of superhero cards. On every card, I've got some here actually, on every card is the definition of a different superhero. So I've got What have I got here? I've got Superman here. I've got Doctor Strange here somewhere. I've got Wonder Woman over here. On the back of the card is a definition of that superhero. And what we do is get a group of people together, give everyone one card, and each card is a different superhero. Each person has to read out their card, and effectively, as they read out the characteristics of their superhero, they need to channel that into their very bones to become that superhero. And then here's the weird bit. They then have to brainstorm solutions to the business problem in the guise of their superhero. And what it guarantees is that they will generate novel ideas because they're based on superheroes, but they'll be impossible to implement. And we refer to this as an intermediate impossible. It's a novel idea that would definitely solve the problem, but it's not possible to implement it. It's novel and useless, which is stage one of creativity. What we then do is to recognize that because each of the superheroes does solve the problem, each is effectively just a metaphor for something in the real world. So the second stage is to work out why that superhero solution works, then find an idea in the real world that has exactly the same set of characteristics. So the superhero solution is simply a Trojan horse to give yourself a set of novel characteristics to do what we are innately very good at, which is to generate a useful idea with the same set of characteristics. And bingo, you end up with a novel and useful idea. And I've applied that technique thousands of times, never fails, provided you follow the rules.
Okay, Peter, what's your view?
Yeah, very much agree with that. That's a great solution. I think that for me, that what the reflection for me is that superheroes have emerged in the collective as an archetype of human being, like a human being. So the artists that created the superheroes were working from those archetypal images. They might not have known that they were doing it at the time, but they put that into the collective through artwork so that we could recognize those kind of archetypal energies that we have. So I think it's really interesting, that kind of idea of novel and useless coming from the archetypal idea. And so yeah, that draws on my belief that creativity is drawing potential down into form. So that I'm hearing that in the sense that you then take that novelty, which is useless, and you draw it into form, which is something that's useful. So that's really good.
So Peter, what would your structure be around creativity? Do you feel structure is required to be the most creative?
Yeah, I believe in energetics as well, in terms of having a masculine structure is really important to allow the emergence to come through. The feminine energy is the energy that emerges in creativity, but it definitely needs structure and process and a direct purpose as well, intention. So all of those things have to be in place before the creativity can emerge. And we see that in organizations as well. If you have an organization that hasn't got great structure and is not holding a healthy leadership, then it starts to inherently act in ways that are shut down creativity.
So can I bring you in on creativity and leadership? Why do you think creativity is important for leaders right now?
I think leadership for me is all about creating a vision, communicating the vision, and then exciting people to engage with the process of moving there. A key element of leadership is driving the innovation process. Widespread across organizations across the land now, we have continuous improvement embedded inside organizations. And the whole process of continuous improvement is about incremental change. It's about taking what you do and making it better. And that's fine, it gets you so far. It is classically a bottom-up process, because the people who are best placed to identify how to improve what they do are the people doing the work. They're also the best people who can then implement those ideas that come out. And that's fine, and that's the continuous improvement process. But every now and then, leaders in an organization should be looking at what they're doing and saying, look, we don't want incremental improvement in this area. We need a step function change. And step function change is nothing to do with better. It's everything to do with different. What you want is a step function change. Stop doing this, and we need to now do this. So what you're doing is taking the world in which people are trapped and saying, forget that, we're going to create a new world where things are done very differently. That takes leadership skills. You do not need many step function changes in an organization in any one year to make a huge transformation. Therefore, choose them strategically. Hang on, that's a leadership issue. So if you're going to choose your step function changes strategically, you need the leadership team engaged with it, because they should then have the leadership skills to encourage everyone to follow them into this brave new world. And it's interesting, particularly now, actually, if you look at what happened with COVID, because come, was it March the 23rd last year, all of a sudden the world changed for everyone. Whatever we had relied upon as the normal way of doing things evaporated overnight. And all of a sudden, people had to find ways of doing things very differently. And that drew upon leadership skills. And it shows you what can be achieved. How many organizations have battled with the implementation of things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams? I know so many organizations that have been flirting with it and having little pilots for years. Then all of a sudden, within a week, they managed to roll it out across an enormous corporation because they had to. And that's the transformation process that demands the leadership skills. What pains me now is that people sit here, leaders you hear speak about, oh, hopefully we're going to return to normal. And what they mean is we don't need the leadership skills anymore. What we can do is rely on the inertia in the organization to incrementally make things better. Nonsense. Seize the moment. Learn the lesson. By removing the way you used to do things, you can transform the thinking moving forward. And that's where you need the creativity. So for me, the last 18 months has been a great learning process for organizations to understand leadership and innovation and the role of creativity in achieving that innovation and transformation. We should not lose it.
Powerful words. Peter, you touched on some really big themes, climate change and the like. What would good look like from you if you were to encourage creativity in looking to solutions that on the big world stage, if you had a blank canvas? Big question.
That's a huge question. I hope I can answer. I'll answer from my interpretation. I do want to draw on what you just said, Dave. I think that's really great, because what I'm hearing is that in any change process, there's always resistance to change. And even if you implement a change creatively, there'll always be the change back resistance energy as well. So that it's part of a process. And like you said, it generally takes around 3 months to 6 months to enact and embody a change in a personal character or a collective character. So the perception of a body, being either yourself or a collective body like an organization. So in terms of for your question, we're really facing a time where we have to rework and reimagine the collective body. We've been living as a species for arguably, thousands of years in this form since really the invention of agriculture. In many ways, the way that we separate ourselves from nature and the way that we take what we want without giving back is not working for us anymore. So that would be, I don't really have a solution, because that's not my place to give that solution. But I think it's really behavioral that we're facing. How many years has it been since the Paris Agreement, and we still haven't implemented those agreements? I think it's that we lack the skills in behavior to change the way that we operate on a large scale.
I agree entirely with what Peter's saying, but I have a slight twist on it, which is I think there is a solution. I think there is a solution out there. We can address climate change, but it demands strong leadership. What we tend to do is make sense of our worlds by looking backwards. So we take what we've got today and we rationalize today by what's happened before. What we then do is say, well, we like what we've had before, but we want slightly more. What we need to do is draw a line in the sand. Ban black plastics. Just ban them. Put a date in the diary and say that's the date at which it's going to happen. Ban diesel engines and petrol engines. Just ban them. Choose a date. We have it within our gift as a world, as a community, to simply stop doing these things. If it means everyone loses their car, go back to the 23rd of March last year. All of a sudden, people had to behave very differently, and it was enforced. And because it was enforced within a very short period of time, the kind of natural vigor of organizations meant they overcame the blocks that have been put in their place to function in a very different way. So rather than saying, well, in the future, we're going to go towards carbon neutral and let's try and set a date that's realistic. How far is realistic? I don't know, 2050. No, don't say that. Make it the end of this decade and say, right, draw a line in the sand. There will be no petrol or diesel cars on the road anywhere in the world at that moment in time. Black plastics will be banned. Plastics will be banned. If we did that, we would address climate change, but we're not going to. And the reason we're not going to is because we will do it incrementally. What we'll do is a bit at a time, a bit. And because of that rationale that's embedded within us, just cautiously, incrementally moving forward, rather than delivering a step function change, climate change is going to be with us for quite some time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's the way that we struggle with that abstraction. We struggle to perceive things that are right in the middle between like very small and very big. So it really takes a difference. The difference between reactive and creative mindset is really imagination. We have to be inspired to creatively reimagine our society, not just say to ourselves, okay, we're faced with this problem, how do we achieve a solution to that? We need, like you said, we need to say, okay, what do we actually want from our society, and how do we want to affect the environment that we're in? And also, yeah, I agree that the solutions are already there. Like there are like out of the box thinking solutions, like mushrooms that break down plastics into compost, and then they spore as mushrooms again. Like there are solutions out there. Nature has solutions out there anyway. So, there will be a solution. We just need to imagine that world and believe in it. Actually, the motivation is really important for us as a species.
And I think, just building on that, Peter, I think that the solutions are out there and we're incrementally developing them. I think what it takes is leadership to say, no, we need a step function change, and this is the time scale. Measure me by this, I will deliver this transformation. That then drives the creative process to accelerate those development programs. So the leadership play a driving role in insisting that people think very differently. That then allows the creativity to come forth, because then it becomes competitive. That competitively, you want different organizations are going to be vying for a premium position in driving that transformation, rather than covertly in the background having a sub-project somewhere to investigate whether potentially we can do something to at least look like we're doing something with climate change, rather than damn well fixing it.
I'm really interested in this area of leadership. Naturally, a lot of our podcasts are interviewing leaders in corporate world. So what can a leader do to make those bold steps that allows them to stay in their leadership role without being deemed weird or too out there?
First of all, they need to have the courage. Sorry, let me take a step back. What they have to have is the understanding of the power of a step function change. But the step function change, by definition, if you want to drive creativity and innovation, the step function change should lead to a visionary outcome that is inconsistent with how we normally do things. Because if the vision is consistent with the way we do things, it will drive continuous improvement and will incrementally get there. It needs to be a step function change to a place where you look at it and go, well, that's just bonkers, because there's no way we can get there if we keep doing the same things. Perfect. Then what they have to do is have the courage to communicate that and to excite people about it, confident that they can then that they will then release the creative juices, nurture a culture in the organization that embraces creativity and creative thinking, to nurture those ideas to deliver that transformative effect. So it takes an understanding of the power of a step function change, recognizing that the outcome must be inconsistent with how we normally do things, to then have the courage to communicate it and put their name against it. Measure me by this. And then wonderful things will happen within the organization, provided they've got the skills to nurture that culture change across their organization.
So I'm thinking Google, Elon Musk, Pixar.
Absolutely. Elon Musk is a classic case. Steve Jobs is another classic case where they come out with outrageous statements and people think this is bonkers. Then what they do is deliver an organization that will give it to them. How fabulous is that?
Peter, any thoughts on that to add?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you just said, and I think it's the difference between reactive leadership and creative leadership. Driving collaboration, really, yeah, having an organization that empowers people and not like a structure that binds them into a certain way of being that doesn't or even shames them into compliance. So it's the difference between an organization that really nurtures their employees' creativity rather than yeah, constricts them into a structure that
agreed, and moves it up the leadership agenda, so that rather than innovation being a minor kind of sub agenda item, if they've got time for it at the end of a board meeting, it needs to be number one. Elon Musk is going to sit there, traveling to Mars or whatever his next ambitious goal will not be a subplot on the agenda in that boardroom. He's put his neck out and said he's going to do it. Therefore, it's going to be highly important. It needs to be elevated and it needs to have that leadership clout behind it. In other words, if people don't do it, then changes need to be made to make sure they do it. It takes courage.
Thank you both so much. We're going to have to wrap it up there, but it's been a really stimulating conversation. I'm sure some things are going to come out of this once we share this with the wider world. Thanks both for your time and look forward to seeing you in real life, in person, in the near future. Thank you. Bye-bye.